Constraints and implements. What the heck are they, and do they belong in our baseball world in 2020 and 2021? This is Jeff Stanek. I'm the founder of Figured Out Baseball, and I wanted to talk about this topic today because it's been a very hot button issue on social media. Now that we're in the baseball offseason, people are training and people are arguing as much as ever. A constraint or implement, to put it simply, is something that a coach will use with a player, a pitcher, hitter, fielder, doesn't matter, will use with a player to help them feel something that otherwise they might not feel, or to over-exaggerate some sort of feeling. An example of this that you've seen if you're on baseball social media or softball social media would be, guys and girls using core velocity belts, people using PVC pipe, people using weighted implemented objects, people using footballs, people using a tennis ball or like a towel under your arm. I've seen a video recently of a hitter using a hula hoop, players using fishing nets, whatever it may be. Anything that coaches use to sort of artificially help a player to feel something can be called a constraint or an implement. Now, are these things inherently bad for our game is kind of what I want to briefly talk about. To me, if a hitter is having an issue and I'm his hitting coach and I'm trying to address this issue and normal swings off of, BP, front toss, the tee are just not getting it done, and this player is not able to make this adjustment that I'm trying to make with him, it is my job as the coach to come up with something creative, think outside the box. I've got to come up with some way to help this player make this adjustment that I'm trying to get him or her to make. Constraints and implements have been around for a long, long time. Think about this, old hitting coaches. I'm not that old, but this has been around for as long as I've been hitting or been a hitting coach. A hitter is having trouble staying inside the ball. He doesn't understand it. His hands are getting away too early, or his barrel is casting too early. So a coach takes a player, puts him up against a fence or a net is in front of him. You put the knob of the bat against your belly button, the cap of the bat straight out in front of you. So if there's a net or a fence, if you have the 33-inch bat, the net or the fence would be 33 inches in front of you. You then have the player take swings and try not to hit the net or the fence. Okay, I think probably a lot of people have seen this. This is sort of an old school constraint and implement for a way to sort of force a player to stay inside the ball, keep his hands tight to his body, release the barrel out front, not too early. But that is an example of a constraint or an implement. There's a million other things out there that coaches are using, and I think that what scares people on social media is they're seeing things that aren't from the baseball world that are being brought into the baseball world. They might see somebody using something that just doesn't belong in a baseball field. My good friend Trevor Burmeister, who's a really good minor league hitting coach in the Rockies organization, he and I talked about this recently, and he uses swim flippers for this one particular thing that if a player has trouble feeling this, he will put a swim flipper on their feet, which obviously sounds a little crazy, but if it works, what's the problem? And that, I think, is the root of this issue. If a coach is trying to address a problem that a player is having, and that coach gets creative and uses something outside the box to create a feel for this player who just hasn't been able to feel this thing, what's the problem? What's the problem with that? Everything doesn't need to come off of, all swings don't need to come off of a machine or overhand BP or front toss or just a regular tee hitting line drives at the middle. There are a lot of other things that coaches can use to help players create things in their swing or in their pitching mechanics that are going to help them long term. And if the best and fastest way to accomplish that is by using some sort of a constraint or an implement, what's the problem? So I guess to answer the question, I believe that there are a lot of very good ones out there, but I believe there's also a lot of garbage out there. It's up to you, the individual, the coach or the parent or the player, to evaluate what you're seeing, whether you're seeing it on social media or whether you're seeing your private instructor introduce some new things. I think you need to ask yourself some questions. Is this going to be helpful? Is this addressing something that I have issues with in a game? If you are seeing a private instructor and every week they're just making up new things just to sort of keep things fresh or to keep you coming through the door and paying for the latest and greatest things, if it's not addressing something that you have issues with in a game or there's something you're trying to specifically get better at, then I would raise some questions. But if you understand and your coaches understand what you need to get better at, and there are things that a coach can introduce to help you get there faster, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for you. Okay. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Again, unless it's addressing something, unless the coach is trying to address something that's not an issue for you. I've had that with players before as a high school coach. I've had kids who have gone to private instructors and then private instructors changing something or introducing something. And as a coach, I'm saying he doesn't have an issue with that. He has other issues we need to address. Why are you addressing this? That's up to you as the individual to decide and to evaluate whether the coach is working on something that you really need. But if he does, there's nothing wrong with a constraint or an implement as long as it's used appropriately. Now, I also wouldn't feel comfortable sending someone to a lesson that was 60 minutes long once a week, and the whole 60 minutes every week was nothing but constraints and implements. I think that hitting high velocity off a pitching machine is super important. Hitting overhand BP is really important. Hitting off of a tee, hitting front toss. Those things are all really valuable to hitters and should all be a part of what you're doing. But if you're trying to make an adjustment and a constraint or an implement is going to be the fastest way for you to make that adjustment, why would you balk at that? This is Jeff Stanek from Figured Out Baseball. If you haven't checked out our website, I would encourage you to check it out. We have 500 plus free videos and podcasts. You'll see a lot of constraints and implements and drills. Drills are really go hand in hand with constraints and implements, I think, and some drills use those things, maybe in different ways, but there's a lot of drills and other things you'll find on our website. We cover hitting, pitching, defense, strength training, the mental game, nutrition, everything you can think of is at figuredoutbaseball.com. If you haven't checked it out before, I hope you will. It's a tremendous resource for players, parents, and coaches of all ages.